Hello, residents. I'm Rich Kalman, and today is the second installment of Ipswich, What's the Plan? This is a new show on cable where I sit down with Glenn Gibbs, the town planner, on a regular basis and discuss issues facing the community that are being addressed by the planning department. Our first program aired back in July, and we discussed public art. And we ended that program with me saying that we would come back and talk about some reorganization that has occurred at the planning department level and how that's impacted Glenn. And we're also going to discuss the town's economic development plan. And so with that, I'm going to ask Glenn. Glenn, can you tell us now what has been the change in the organizational structure at the planning department?
Sure. Last fall, about a year ago, our assistant planner, Kathy Kohner, took another position out of state, and we and I and the town manager talked about the possibility of doing something a little different than the organization was at the time, and based on that conversation, we decided to elevate that position to a senior level position so that person could take over a lot of the planning and sort of regulatory processes that have occupied a lot of my time in my tenure here.
And so can you just talk a little bit about Ethan, who's our new planner?
Sure. Ethan Parsons had previously been working in the town of Wellesley for, I think, 6 years, and so he's very familiar with planning bylaws and statutes in Massachusetts, and also experienced with working with planning boards and other groups. And so he came into the position very ready to take over the responsibility of staffing the planning board, which is previously something that I handled along with the assistant planner. He now does that. That's his sole responsibility. I don't really play much of a role in the day-to-day operation anymore of the planning board.
So that really leads to my next question was, how has this change really affected your day-to-day job function?
Well, quite a bit, and I think what's important to ask too is what motivated this change, and it's really to allow the planning office to focus more of its time and energy on issues relating to economic development than it has been able to do in the past. And that is an emphasis that the town manager has placed on our department since her arrival here. And she has done things over the past few years to facilitate that. And this is the most important step, or the most significant step that she's taken to really allow a greater amount of effort and hopefully more results. Not that we haven't had results, but by having a more concentrated effort in the area of economic development, we think we can achieve more in a greater period of time than we would have otherwise.
So then how has this changed your day-to-day job function?
Well, previously a fairly significant portion of my job was spent providing assistance to the planning board along with the assistant planner, and also providing assistance to the historical commission, and then doing other as well as the housing partnership, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund board, and also doing projects or activities such as land disposition, which is a process that we follow whenever we're interested in selling land or we're considering accepting gifts of land from other people. So those are all various processes that I was responsible for, and they're quite time consuming. And those have now been more or less, all of those that I just described, been passed along to Ethan, freeing me up to do more economic development work.
Let me just ask you this, Glenn. If someone comes in off the street now with a proposal, commercial somewhat, is it more likely that he's going to first go through Ethan now to discuss a proposal?
It depends. If a person comes in and it's a proposal that's related, it's an economic development proposal or an economic development issue, that person is likely to talk to me. unless they're coming in and they've already got a project mapped out, and they just want to come in and talk about what the approval process is going to be, then they probably would go directly to Ethan. But in most cases, and this has been really the case during my entire tenure here in the last 20 years or so, is that if somebody's thinking about doing something pretty significant, usually there's interaction and conversation about that before it gets to the stage of actually submitting to a board for approval. So economic development projects, commercial and industrial activity, that kind of stuff is likely that person is likely to start with me.
Okay. So can you now tell me a bit about this economic strategy that the planner or the planning department has developed?
Sure. When the town manager and I started talking about this, and I should say that I think I mentioned that Kathy, our assistant planner, left in October, November. Ethan came on board at, I think, end of January, early February. So it's really just been about 6 months that he's been here. But we felt that it was important to have in essence, a work program for me and our office to follow relative to our economic development efforts, so that we had a way of gauging our success against our milestones that we've established, and also to have a guidance document so that which will help us to prioritize what we were doing and so forth.
So can you give me a brief overview now of what this strategy is?
Yes, I'll do that. And I think the viewer is going to be seeing for the next few minutes slides that I put together in a PowerPoint and presented initially to the selectmen at the end of August, and then recently to an event that was sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce. And so that's what you'll be seeing, and I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because this show is only a half hour, and we're going to spend most of the time talking about stuff related to this, but not so much the specific plan. So anyway, with that, let me dive in. The strategy itself, as I said, is going to be a guidance document for the town. We've set it up for a 2-year period, and even though it's not going to be accomplished in 2 years. That's not practical. And you'll understand that as I go through this further and what's involved. However, we do hope to have a significant progress made on, and maybe even some of these items completed within that 2-year period. This plan is not a standalone. It's really informed by and consistent with a whole bunch of other documents that are listed on the slide. The strategy has 3 components to it. One relates to what are the areas of focus, of which there are 5. One has to do with business mix and clusters. Second has to do with built environment. A third, mixed use. 4, marketing, and the 5th, business strategies. And what I wanted to I'll just say a little bit about each. The business mix clusters, one of the goals of the economic development effort will be to try to expand or help to or maintain existing clusters, niches, shall we say. And Ipswich has one in eatery, and the prospect of another brewery opening up in the next year. And so that's a cluster, and we want to try to build on that. The built environment really relates to improving the infrastructure of the town, sidewalks, parking, streets, and that's something that town is responsible for, and we will be looking at ways to do that in the years ahead. Mixed use, that's an objective that we have for providing a resident population in the downtown, which provides vitality when the businesses are closed, as well as a bit of a captive population for the business, the service, and retail community, because those folks are right there in the downtown. Marketing is an important aspect, and we'll be working on that as part of our strategy. and the town has already and will continue to provide assistance to business owners with strategies for improving their success as business folks. And just want to reflect back a second on a built environment. What I didn't note, intended to, was one of the things that we're doing, this probably is going to happen in the spring now, is a installation of what are called wayfinding signs, which will have a logo and a common color code, and these signs will have various purposes. Some will be to welcome tourists or visitors to the town at the entrances to the town. Others will be to direct people to places of interest within the town itself, and some will be kiosks or business directories to help people specifically find where they can go when they're in the center of town, where they can find things. So moving on to the strategic approach, there's really three components of that. One is to develop and enhance existing partnerships that we have. To be successful, you really need to have the government and the private sector working hand in hand. And some of the entities that we have been and will continue to work with will be the Ipswich Chamber of Commerce, the Ipswich Visitor Center, the North Shore Chamber of Commerce, the Center for Economic Development and Sustainability at Salem State College, and the Mass Office of Business Development, which has been, it's the office at the state level that's involved with bringing funding to certain economic development projects that we've utilized in the past. So a second strategic approach is is communication. And what we will be doing, and we're setting this up right now, is establishing an email list of all businesses in the community, and then start doing what we call email flashes, which is something that can be done on the new website. Anyone who's interested can sign up, and if they sign up to that, and when our office releases an email, they will be alerted to that. And so when the letter goes out shortly to all the businesses that are registered in town as businesses, they will have the option, be given the option of signing up, and then they'll be able to get flashes of news as they happen relating to economic development.
And Glenn, I want to say I heard you present that to the selectmen and at the Chamber of Commerce, and I thought that really did strike a very important note to the businesses that were at the chamber meeting, because it is a way for, I think, the planning department to truly show businesses that things are happening on a regular basis. I mean, most business owners really aren't attuned to what you're doing regularly, what initiatives you might have in process. And so I really do hope, having heard that's something that you will focus on, because I think of all the ideas, that one has a very immediate impact. And I think it'll be a great way for the planning department to reach out to businesses and show them that, yep, there are things that we are working on that are in the pipeline. So certainly I'm going to encourage the businesses that are watching this to sign up for that and be on that email list. Do you know if any other departments are going to be doing that same kind of e-blasting?
Yes, that's my understanding. I don't know to the extent it's been done yet, but I know that it's planned for multiple departments. Right.
Okay.
So the third sort of component of the strategic approach for this strategy is to have a group that can provide guidance to me and our office as we undertake this work. And so we have created an economic development advocacy group, and as you can see from the slide, there's a whole range of perspectives that are represented, and that group has already met once. We had a productive meeting. Now we'll be meeting at least quarterly, probably more frequently, at least at the outset, as a way to provide guidance to me and a group that can advocate for economic development and help to implement some of the objectives and the recommended actions of the strategy. Then the objectives that are set forth, and I'm going to go through these really quickly because we want to move on to some other things. The objectives talk about focusing our business recruitment and retention efforts on those clusters that we defined earlier, aligning tourism activities and efforts with local businesses. That's something that Kerry Bates has been doing as the Director of Recreation and Culture with Downtown Tuesdays and other events in the summertime, and with good success, and that will continue. Encouraging property owners or business owners to use social media because there are a lot of opportunities that can come out of that, and identifying the best kind of mix of merchandise and services that we have in the downtown and working to try to achieve that. Providing a system of directing visitors around the town, that's the wayfinding program that I mentioned earlier. Expending public dollars to upgrade roads, the infrastructure improvements. And then also the last objective, which is important, is to ensure that the local process, the local government process for permitting and regulatory review, those processes are clear and efficient, and that they're also applied fairly across the board. And we had a fair amount of discussion about that last night at the business community meeting, and it's clear that that's an area of interest by that community. The objectives provide the overall goal or approach for specific actions, and that's the last few of these slides that I'll go over quickly. Several of the action items that we're going to be undertaking as part of this program one is to continue work on developing a design plan and an implementation strategy for the Hammond Street parking lot. Another action item is working with EBSCO on parking options that may involve a public-private partnership. EBSCO is a very important employer to the town. In the town, it has over 1,000 employees. They play an important role to the vitality of the downtown, and they have identified a way to grow jobs within their existing buildings, but they need additional parking to handle that, and so there are some things under discussion to try to address those. A third action item is the wayfinding signs, which we mentioned, which I've already mentioned a couple times. They have been, at least the first phase of that program has been funded by town meeting last spring, and so the monies are there, and you'll start seeing these signs come spring at locations around town. Other action items, providing technical assistance to the businesses. We did in 2014. We provided some assistance to retail businesses. That was helpful. We're going to be doing the communication, as I mentioned earlier, and a couple specific projects that we're also looking at is extending the downtown Riverwalk beyond its current limits to bring it down closer to the downtown, to the area near where the Farley Brook outfalls into the Ipswich River, and have a little overlook park there. There's funding for that, and we're in the process of setting up a committee to get that rolling. There's a lot of interest on a number of people to be part of that process. We also, and this is probably a second year program, not the first year, is to be looking at ways to find monies to make improvements to High Street, the central High Street, particularly what I'm talking about, from Lord Square to Welcome's Corner. That section is one of the most historic streets in the entire country. Large number of homes from the first period, 1600s, and but yet we have an infrastructure that's not adequate. We have decaying sidewalks, some cases no sidewalks at all. The road's in poor condition, and so that is a project that we're really looking to focus on. Again, not this next year, but the year after. And then there's also, we'll be continuing efforts to work on a marketing strategy and strategies for helping the partnership between the two communities, the two sectors, the public and private, as we go forward.
Let me ask, Glenn, you mentioned the Hammond Street Lot, and I've been in town 25 years. I know that has been discussed for a long time, and you mentioned in your presentation to both the selectmen and to the Chamber of Commerce that you thought now there might actually be a better opportunity to actually have something come to fruition. Can you just talk, why you have some optimism for that?
Sure. Let me start by saying that the reason, think the primary reason why this has been such a thorny issue and so difficult to achieve, because it's been talked about for decades, well before I arrived here 20 years ago, and that is that we have a parking lot that's owned by multiple owners. There are 4 primary owners: the town of Ipswich, and the Ipswich Bank, First Bank of Ipswich, the owners of the building that houses the TD Bank North, and then the owners of 15 Market Street, where the Family Dollar and other businesses are located. And so each of those owners has their own interests and needs, and so trying to reach a consensus among those about how do we manage that lot is challenging. There are other issues too. There's been contamination in that area from centuries ago, frankly, that we've had to remediate, and we have to be careful about taking actions down there that might dredge up other materials that could lead to additional costs. So, and there are also drainage issues down there that have to be dealt with. So it's a complicated matter, but I think the reason why there's the reason why I think there's a better chance now than ever is, one, that we have, for the first time in the last couple of years, the selectmen have put some money forward to try to address this issue, and we've engaged an engineer and a landscape architect to come up with some concepts which have been shared with the community and with the owners. I think to general interest, although there's a lot of details to be worked out. The next stage now is to further those plans along a bit and begin the hard effort of trying to find common ground on a strategy. And the reason why you need common ground is that we can't improve a lot with public money and not have any degree of control over how that lot gets managed. And so the tricky part is finding a way to be able to use public dollars to improve that lot for use not just by the town but by the private parties, but doing it in a way that allows the public to expend that money and to have some public use of the whole space.
And I assume you think that the benefit that would come to all those business owners is that there would be an increase in the number of spaces, and aesthetically, I mean,
yeah,
it's not a very attractive lot.
Right. That's right. It's not. It's certainly a number of. Let's see. I think we're talking about 35 spaces or more could be created. That's quite significant, but that's not the only aspect of this. It's having a more attractive lot, having a lot that can be used more to access the buildings from the backside than what currently happens. So there are there's a host of benefits that could derive this. Right now there's about 19 different trash receptacles down scattered through the lot. And
snow plowing must be done by all kinds of...
Well, snow plowing, we actually have a cooperative effort now with the owners, and that's actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's another reason why we have some more optimism now, is that we've been working very effectively over the last couple of years on a shared plowing plan between the town and the businesses, and so that's given us some optimism too. We can continue that in a more broad way.
So we're going to wrap this up now, Glenn, pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
You've put out a lot of ideas.
Yep.
The government sector tends to work slowly, not as quickly as private enterprise.
Yep.
So I guess realistically, in closing, what things could you see really happening within a shorter time frame? What things do you realistically say could happen in the 2-year time frame? So your feelings on what we could really look for as a community to come out of this.
Well, I think what's important, you're absolutely right. I mean, things, and I know that full well. When I came here in '94, we first started talking a year or two after about the Riverwalk and about the North Green, and now we were able to accomplish both of those, but not for many, many years after that happened. So do I think in 2 years the Hammond Street Lot is going to be reconfigured and improved? No, I think that's not going to happen. But we can certainly do things in the next 2 years to make the likelihood of that occurring much, much stronger than it is right now, and start putting ourselves in a position to do that. The same is true with the work with EBSCO. That's going to be a very, if it transpires as we were discussing, that's going to be a major effort, and will likely take years to do as well. But if we're in 2 years at a point where we can see the finish line, then we've made a big accomplishment. Some of the other things, such as the wayfinding signs, well, we'll have maybe not all the wayfinding signs in, but a good percentage of them. I think it's also very possible that the Riverwalk extension will be done within that 2-year period. And I think there'll be progress on some of the other items, such as even on High Street, although that's not going to be done, but there'll be some headway. So I think the best way to think about what we're proposing here is, yes, it's a 2-year plan, but it doesn't mean that the stuff in there is all going to happen in 2 years. Most of it probably won't be completely done in 2 years. I think the success of the plan should be measured more about, are we making continuous progress on these objectives and recommended actions during that 2-year period.
And I assume the Board of Selectmen may be asking you to present at some point. I'm just thinking, maybe a year out, or
sure.
If they don't, then I'll bring you back on this show and ask you, Glenn, can you go over this and tell the public if there's been some progress on
I know that I'll be coming back to the Selectmen at least once a year, if not more than that. And I'll also be working with the Chamber and other business groups on a even more regular basis than that. And we'll always be talking about how things are going. And then, of course, with the Economic Development Advocacy Group, I mean, they will also be reviewing the things that are doing and talking about what steps they might be able to take to facilitate.
Yep. I think, Glenn, in closing, that communication is a key. It was discussed before the Ipswich Chamber of Commerce. I think you got a very strong reaction from business owners that they actually did feel that things were moving in a very good direction in this community, and that a lot of good things had occurred over the last 20 years. But I think if you can continue to communicate, and I think through media, the way we just talked with those e-flashes, I think there's a lot that could be done to continue to educate the residents and the business community about the progress that you're making.
I agree, and I think one point that came out last night that I thought made a lot of sense was that there is sometimes an impression among folks in the business community and others that that positive things aren't happening, that the government isn't doing what it could be doing, and that that Ipswich maybe is a difficult place to do business and so forth. And by having the email flashes, we can keep the residents informed about things that are happening that we think and we think they'll think are in the interest of the business community and are to their benefit.
Yeah, I will say this: as they call it now, the Recreation Department has certainly made some tremendous strides. I know this is a little off the topic.
Well, not entirely, because it's an important component of what we're trying to do.
And I will say, I think you can see that there's been quite a new number of cultural events.
Yes.
The farmers market, many things, the Tuesday night functions. And so I think that communication, that's getting out there in a very positive way. I think that would be actually a good role model to follow.
Well, I can go further than that to say that I have been working fairly closely with Carrie Bates and plan on doing that, even more of that as we get further into this economic effort.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you for the time. We'll come back and have a new program, hopefully in a very short time, and talk about another issue facing the town of Ipswich. So for now, I'd like to say thank you to everyone at home, and tune in, and thank you very much.